they sit on the ground a lot, but it might have been just off. Now, someone told me there's two of them, so I don't know. I've never seen two, but it might have been. I wouldn't give up. My brother went today and saw it, but that he went around 1 o'clock.
So it must have came back because I was there for sunrise through 10 a.m. And I was out there about 2 weeks ago during a lake effect snow squall. So I actually got some images, but it was hunkering down in that tall grass facing the west,
Oh,
I think, where it pretty much was hanging around. So, no, have to try again.
yeah. So the one time I was there Saturday, it was sitting right on the walkway, and it started walking, and these people started walking and scared it up.
Don't know.
Elizabeth, I take you want me to start,
Sure.
or did you want to start and I introduce?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Hey, and we're right on time here. Okay, welcome everybody to the Camera Club meeting for February. Tonight we have Daniel Gregory, and pardon my cat, he's loves to make noise right when I want to talk. Daniel, after an early career in technology, a lifelong love of cameras led him to photography, a shift that made him more present, thoughtful, and connected to the world. Embracing that change, he found not only creative voice behind the lens, but a deeper purpose in teaching and mentoring others. He believes photography is as much about community as it is about images, and helping people tell their story and connect with what matters is the most rewarding work he knows. Based near Seattle, he shares life and creative space at Silly Dog Studios with his partner Lori, their dogs, and two cats.
Come on.
They run the place. So, and you can tell this cat runs my place. He loves to sit on my switcher while I do my Zooms. So welcome, Daniel. Good to see you tonight, and I'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me out for a little while, and I'm pretty excited about tonight's topic. We're going to be talking about influence and inspiration in our work, and it's a really kind of fun, cool topic. A couple of years ago, I teach. I'm a core faculty member at the school where I teach at. That's where I'm at now. I got a class. Once we're done here tonight, I've got a class on scanning your film to teach. But
Oh boy.
a couple of years ago, though, I got really interested in sort of my own research about sort of how I turned into the photographer I turned into. Because when I first started, I sort of knew Ansel Adams, and so I did black and white stuff, kind of like Ansel Adams. But over the years, I realized, I was kind of developing my own style, my own approach, and I was actually on a photo trip with a photo mentor of mine, and we were actually coming through. We had been down in the Las Vegas area doing Red Rocks and the Valley of Fire and the desert. And, as we came back through Vegas one time, we just stopped to putz around on Fremont Street, and he came walking up and he showed me a photograph. He's like, "Hey, I took one of your photographs," and he showed me the back of his camera, and it's like, how could you take one of my photographs? I don't even know how I take my own photographs. But it was one of the first times I sort of realized that something in the way I photographed had started to coalesce into something sort of unique. And always sort of remembering that, I sort of started to chase down, like, well, where did that come from? And that led me to actually develop a class on imitation, influence, and inspiration, and how those pieces come about and where they come from. And since then, I've taught it a number of times, and I just have found it to be a really neat experience to talk about those, particularly in imitation and influence, and sort of how we approach our work and things like that. So I'm excited here to talk about that. I've got some examples of portfolios I've been working on, and have displayed recently in a couple of galleries around that concept where I can sort of speak to those things. But that's sort of what we're going to be doing tonight. I'm pretty excited here. Let me go ahead and share out a screen real fast here and get that little piece started up here. And if you got any questions or whatever, feel free to interrupt me. I'm never bothered by an interruption or a question, so feel free to jump on that. And the place I wanted to start was sort of talking about imitation and what is imitation. And imitation is not a replication per se in my sort of world and definition. Replication is I take something, I go put it on the photocopier, and I attempt to make an exact copy. Now, a number of years ago, I have a friend who's a photographer who got fascinated by that idea, and she literally Xeroxed the same photograph and then Xeroxed the Xerox and Xeroxed the Xerox, and eventually caught a blank piece of paper after like 1,000 Xeroxes. But that's neither here nor there. But just in that world of sort of exact replication. So imitation, though, is different than that. It's got a little bit of a component where we're mimicking or trying to replicate a given style or technique, maybe even a motif or a concept. And one of the reasons why I'm so interested in imitation is I think it's an incredible learning tool. And I think imitation oftentimes gets a really bad rap. And I think it gets a really bad rap in photography in some circles because, we'll go out and somebody will have a real sort of definitive style. For a long time, Joel Grimes was like that. Joel Grimes had a definitive look. Uh, and all of a sudden, you saw a lot of other photographers do that style. We saw this when HDR was first coming out, and there was kind of the trend of HDR. And somebody like a Trey Ratcliffe or an RC Concepcion who had written books on it and the technique on it, you started to sort of see replication in that. And the great part is it gives us a way to learn. It gives us a way to anchor because there's something to compare. And that's one of the important parts of sort of our learning process is there's something I'm doing and I need to somehow put a bar against that. Am I actually learning that or not? And so that learning bar is one of the things that imitation allows us to do because we can do the comparison there. Now, one of the other great pieces about it is that my mouse is taking over my computer screen. Is that it allows us to understand and master aspects of work from established bodies of work. And so one of the big challenges for anybody who ever starts off is, if I get into Photoshop, I get into Lightroom, that's a complex program. That's a complex process. I then throw on a camera that's got shutter speeds and f-stops and continuous focus and manual focus. And there's all sorts of different settings in there that can cause complications. And so the other thing that imitation does is it allows us to look at somebody else's work, somebody else who in many ways has mastered that craft and see what they've done and how they've done it. By then internalizing that, we're able to take that and turn it into something much more significant, much more interesting in our own work. Another big piece around imitation is that we learn by imitating things. We learn by looking at something, dissecting what it is, pulling it apart, putting it back together. And that ingrains within us actually true learning. There's, and I think this has happened probably to a lot of us. It happens to me all the time. I'll watch a technique. I'll get on YouTube or I'll sit at a conference or something and I'll watch somebody do something and I'll be like, oh, I totally got that. Like I can do that. And then I go home and I have no idea what I watched, no idea what I saw. But if I can sit there why somebody's doing something, or if I can figure out actually what happened during that session or in that video, I can all of a sudden realize, oh, if I can do that over and over again in my own work, I in fact learn that behavior. I learn that skill. That's one of the things I see in my students, in the school I teach at. I see it in the workshops out of my studio. Is there's a point of show me how to do that again, show me how to do that again. And eventually it's like, oh, I understand how to do that. I understand that process by which that came about. And that's when things get ingrained in us. And that's when we really sort of learn those elements. So imitation offers us a couple of really cool things, I think. One, it offers us an opportunity to, again, internalize techniques and master crafts within our work and practice those skills. I think one of the other things that imitation does, and this for me is the second point in this third point. So we learn about some of the history and art of our craft. We also engage with contemporary and historical artists within our field of practice. And I think that is really critical because one of the things when we're talking about, I think it might be the next slide, when we're talking about creating work, and so many times we hear people talk about wanting to create unique work. I want my own work. I want to sort of have my own style. I want to be known for my own thing. And then you create work and somebody's like, oh, that work looks like somebody else's. And you're like, well, how can it look like somebody else's? I've never even heard of that person. When we get into influence, we'll talk about sort of how that happens. But as an example here, real quick, let me just get out of this slide here. I'll show you a quick image here inside of Lightroom. Let's look at this one. So it's just an image out on the Pacific Ocean towards sunset. We've got this image here. And then if I come back in and show you another image, let's come back into that keynote slide here and right here. I'll let you look at that image. So those look not identical, but they're relatively close. Okay, that black and white one, get back over there. That black and white one is Sugimoto, one of Sugimoto's pieces. And so this image here, I could actually convert into black and white and do some blur work and actually get it really, really close to the Sugimoto image. The piece around the imitation, though, is number of times I've been out working with people where there's that large body of water, those clouds, they do a long time lapse, a long exposure, they get the drag on everything. And then when I'm like, oh, cool, you made a Sugimoto photograph. They're like, I don't know I don't know who Sugimoto is. I don't know what that even means. Is that a person? Is that a place? And when we look at imitation, when we go seek out things to imitate, we start to recognize that we stand on a lot of shoulders of other photographers who've come before us that are ultimately, through either imitation or influence or some level of inspiration, they're shaping how we see the world. They're shaping how we approach our photography. And the other piece that I think, if we engage in the practice of imitation, one of the things it does, like I said, is it allows us an entry point, an easier entry point into engaging with contemporary and historical artists. If you've ever picked up a history of photography book, not only are they incredibly biased towards who the writer was and what country they were written in, but they're also very limited in scope. And a lot of the history books only go up through the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s. We haven't had a lot of contemporary history books written lately. But there's a lot of amazing things going on in photography. And so if we start looking at some of the work of contemporary photographers against historical photographers, we can start to realize that, wow, there's places, again, to find moments of either inspiration, a chance to learn a technique, or to understand that we are subconsciously or consciously being influenced by those photographers, whether we know it or not. All of the Sugimoto and the example of the image I took before. There's no way I could deny that Sugimoto didn't have some impact on that photograph. I mean, the composition, the framing, the subject matter, everything sort of sits in there. And that's not to say that Sugimoto owns the cornerstone on that. But when you start to look at certain photographs where you're like, wow, that looks really like that, we see that imitation element come into play. So one of the things that I also think is really important and significant, sort of thinking about and working with imitation, is it requires us to take a critical aspect, a critical thought into sort of how we approach the work. There are things that we may want to imitate within something, and there are things we may not want to imitate within things. And so that identification process is also a critical part of being able to work within our confines of understanding what we're imitating, what we're attempting to replicate via style and technique and things like that. And also what we're not. Oftentimes, one of the most powerful things in the creative process is the recognition of what you're not and what you're not going to do. You're all photographers. I'm sure you all have friends. I'm sure you tell them you're photographers. And inevitably, one of them at some point comes by and goes, oh, yeah, that's right. You're a photographer. My second cousin, Judy, is getting married this spring and is looking for a photographer. And you're like, I'm not a wedding photographer. Just by saying that gets you out of a really awkward situation with the family, with figuring it out or whatever. That idea of what you're not is really interesting. And imitation is one of the coolest spots to sort of see that. Because when we realize there's things I don't want to imitate, there's things I don't want to replicate in my work, that becomes a really powerful identifier for sort of your evolution and who you are as a photographer. Now, one of the other sort of interesting things about imitation, which this sort of bleeds into influence. When we get into influence, you realize that, this stuff I'm talking about is really a continuum. There's not a imitation bucket and an influence bucket and an inspiration bucket. It's really a continuum of gradation that we're on. But one of the things I've sort of realized over the last couple of years is there is the imitation of the unknown. And we engage in the imitation of work without realizing the exposure, the memory, or where the influence came from. And that process, I think, is a really interesting experience as well, because when we get into that sort of the three buckets of knowledge, there's the things I know, the things I know I don't know, but it's that things I don't know that I don't know, which is, I think, probably my biggest bucket and a lot of our biggest buckets. We just don't have any idea how big that bucket is because, again, we don't know what's in that bucket. But that imitation coming at me a lot, and that I'm in fact imitating something unbeknownst to me. And similar piece, if I come back out of here and we jump back into Lightroom and I come onto this image is just a little there's a park here in Seattle. It's just a tiny little, probably 4-foot tall waterfall in this little park. Take this picture, and I processed it and sort of cropped it and did the contrast and sort of gave it the imitation influence of sort of maybe something Ansel would have done. And so big bright whites, big bold blacks, maximizing contrast, maximizing sharpness. And so thinking about the imitation of Ansel in there. Now, the risk of that imitation comes from when I started my career and when I started doing my early photography. I don't say I wanted to be Ansel, but I was really wanting to be Ansel. And so all the photographs I took were these big landscapes and these big open landscapes. And I mastered, back in the day, I was doing film and I was shooting large format cameras, and I became a really good technician in the darkroom. And I had an instructor, one of the best instructors I've ever had for photography. And I was signing up to do this year-long cohort project and thesis. And
Hi.
I had to interview to get in there.
Good.
And Claire interviewed me, and she said, let me see some of your work. And so I brought in the work I had.
Sure.
And
Sure.
she looks
Oh,
at the one
I-
image and she says, "Oh, this is a really beautiful image. Do you have a bathroom in your house?" And I was like, yeah, I mean, I live in the city. We have a bathroom. She's like, "Oh, you should take this picture. You should put a really nice frame on it. And then you should go sit on your toilet. And on the wall across, you should hang it right there so you can look at it every day. Because I don't want to ever see shit like that in this class again." She's like, "I've already seen Ansel's work. I already know what Ansel stuff looks like. So if you're trying to be Ansel, I don't need to have a conversation with you going forward." And I was like, "I'm not trying to be Ansel. I'm not trying to imitate Ansel." She's like, "But you are." And so that imitation point became an interesting thing that subconsciously it had so rooted into the way I was thinking and approaching my photography, I wasn't even questioning if I was doing that. On the inverse side of that, a number of years ago, Ansel had an assistant named Don Worth. And Don was an amazing photographer, amazing darkroom printer, really generous in sharing and communicating. And at one point, somebody said to Don, "Oh, your work looks exactly like Ansel's." And he said, "Wow, I can't think of a better compliment for a photographer like me." And so, again, a lot of when we're thinking about the notion of imitation and influence and things like that, it's really about how we want that experience to be internalized for us. If I don't want to be Ansel Adams and I'm imitating Ansel, then that's a problem for me. But if I'm embracing that and I'm leaning into that and I'm using that as fuel and motivation to go create my own work, then that's a wonderful thing. So it's not, again, that there's a good or bad within this. There's angles to all of that. We just sort of have to figure out how we're going to process those things individually. All right. So sort of, I came up with a couple of exercises for you all to do. I mean, not right now. This will require a little more work than you're doing in the next 2 minutes. But one of the things that's really fun to do in the imitation game, and like I said, this works great for learning techniques, is you select a piece of art that you want to imitate, some random piece of art. Then you go make a photograph where you replicate that as best you can. So you find a painting, maybe you find a Rembrandt painting you like. You come back and you try to replicate the light, the color palette, the tones. Maybe you want to simulate the brushstrokes inside Photoshop, whatever you're going to do. You're trying to replicate that as best as possible. Then you're going to write down everything you sort of learned from that experience. And this is one of the interesting things about sort of getting the maximum quality, the maximum value out of working with imitation and influence is we have to sort of define some language in it that's outside of our head. So when I look at work and I'm like, oh, I did a good job on that. I replicated this, I replicated that, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. It's all in my head. None of that gets ingrained. We're it's I forgot the exact number, but it's somewhere between 70 and 80% more likely to internalize things we've written down. And so by writing down what we learned from the experience, what can I add in my workflow? What can I remove from the workflow? It gets a really interesting growth opportunity for us. Now, second thing you can do is a transformation imitation game. So this one requires you to have done step one, but you go select the work that's been replicated some via imitation, some form, and then you go do some weird stuff to that image. Not process it like you normally would, but do crazy stuff to it. Maybe you hypersaturate colors. Maybe you crop it in a weird way. Maybe you use the selection tool and you cut holes into the image and make it look like Swiss teas. Who knows? Who knows what you do to it? You just do something really weird. And then again, you sit down with that process of what was it like to, one, not do your normal process, what you would always do. What was that like? What did you learn from that? What is it like to take something and do something completely outlandish to it? Was that a creative energy for you? Was that a dissuasive energy for you? What came out of that process? For me, this is one of the fun ones to do because I have to sort of consciously think about what's not in my world right when I process the photograph or process the image. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm using tools and techniques I had never thought of before. And so, one of the ones is if I come back here, we'll get out of here. This technique got me into, so let's come down here and we'll grab, say, this image here and get my tools back. Move that over here. I'm just going to change the shape of this. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to, oh no, I made it big. Hold on. I got to reshrink it. Oh no, now I'm in the wrong window. Oh my gosh. So many bad things are happening right now. Get back to Lightroom. Okay. Zoom is just doing weird stuff. All right. Come back into the development module and get out soft proof here. Let's get back into our main loop view. All right. Most of you know the sins of the dehaze slider. I come and hit that dehaze slider and it does pretty egregious things to color. I grab a color image in dehaze and I get weird shadows, weird contrast, bad stuff happens. I get my little owl here. This guy used to, for about a year, lived right behind my studio. Oh, he does pretty well. Grab this one. Dehaze just does not good stuff. But in the world of sort of playing with things being a little wonky, a little different, a little weird, I was like, oh, well, let's grab something and we'll grab an image here. I'll convert that to black and white. And then I'll come in and I'll hit the dehaze slider. I was like, well, wait a minute. There's no weird color there. All I'm getting is this incredible deep boost of contrast. And I was like, oh, I never in a million years would have come in that. But by picking an image where I was looking at a really saturated photograph somebody else had made, then as I did that, I came back in and I'm like, oh, with that being done, with that little element being done, I'm going to come in and use the dehaze to saturate, happen to also convert it to black and white and find that technique. So I think that's another piece to sort of consider in that workflow process, for that sort of way of playing with this tool. Now, the last one is, and this one I think is one of the coolest exercises I've done. I do this still to this day in my studio. I do it with some friends on occasion. We do it online sometimes. But find a group of photographers and select some image, some painting, sculpture, something to imitate. And then everybody goes out and makes the best imitation possible they can from that source material. Then return to the group. Everybody reviews what everybody else has done and came up with, and then discuss what you noticed, what you see, what did people interpret differently, what did they decide to do differently, what did they account for differently. This is really cool because you're not only seeing how people's creative process works, but you're also starting to see other ways that you might have been able to imitate work that you hadn't considered before. So again, that big bucket of I don't know what I don't know, by seeing how other people imitate, we sort of get to wedge that door open a little bit and we get to have some of that stuff spill out into our world and sort of figure out what's going on with that. All right, so influence. So again, like I said, there's this long continuum we're on that sits between sort of imitation, influence, and inspiration. And influence, so influence is something that directly or indirectly shapes our creative practice. It could be an internal locus, it could be an external locus. And this is really less about copying and replicating and more about the evolution of who we are in our artistic style. The thing about this could come from anywhere. So influences could have been set decades ago that we're just now realizing now. They could be things that are happening in the moment. And it's really interesting when we sort of pull this part of the puzzle apart, because this is probably the biggest impact in our photographic process and in our creative life is the nature of influence. Now we have direct influences. Direct influences occur when we know the source. So we can say, oh, I know I was influenced by this particular photographic processing style or this particular photographer's way of seeing. There's a wonderful West Coast photographer named Todd Hido. Todd has this night photography and low light photography that is just sublime. And Todd has influenced a lot of photographers who do nighttime photography. And if you ask them, like, oh, in your nighttime work, what influences you? They'll say, oh, Todd does. Todd was a huge influence in sort of me thinking about how to approach color and shadow and allowing for sort of the underpinnings of the eeriness of the night to come through. So when we can articulate what it is, it's a direct influence. We also have indirect influences. Indirect influences are things that we're not even aware are causing an influence on us. One of my biggest ones for this one is a number of years ago, I was out photographing in the Olympic National Park. And I was shooting an 8x10 camera, and it was lucky because back then a sheet of film was only about $11. So it wasn't crazy expensive like it is now. And so, and I could only carry my pack fully loaded with the tripod, the camera, the plates, water, the 10 essentials, all the stuff I had to carry out there. It was about 65 pounds. So I only carried about six plates normally. So I could take 6 photographs on a little one-day hiking trip. And I found this really cool place in the Hall of Moss. And if you've never been to the Hall of Moss, just imagine a bunch of trees that look like a Hall of Moss. It's completely appropriately named. You walk in and you're like, oh, it's like a Hall of Moss. So, 1,000-year-old trees with just moss hanging for thousands of feet down to the ground. Beautiful, rich color. And it's early afternoon. And so, but the light's great in there, but there's now this convection heating that's starting up and down the mountain. And so the wind would pick up and then the wind would die. And then when the wind died, the moss would hang there, the wind would pick up and it would all move. When I got up there, being still sort of in my West Coast F-64 tradition of everything sharpened in focus, foreground to background, everything sharpened in focus mentality, I'm standing there, make the first photograph. It's about 45 seconds with the filters and the reciprocity failure. And then here comes the wind down the hill and all that moss starts to move. I'm like, great. Close off the exposure, flip the thing over, stick it back in the camera. Now I stand there for a couple of minutes. I'm like, okay, so what's the cadence of that? It's like waves, there's a cadence to it. So I'm like, okay, I can time this. I got this. I miss it again. I miss it again. I miss it again. I'm now on my last plate, where I've now literally wasted 5 plates of God knows what's in them. And it finally hits me. I'm like, and I remember saying to myself, this wind is really starting to piss me off. And I was like, oh my God, I'm being influenced by the wind. My mood, my state of being, my mindset, my approach, the timing, everything was being influenced by the wind. So up to that point, that had been a complete indirect influence on me. I was aware of it, but I wasn't aware of the level that it was taking me to. So for that last plate, I was like, oh, what if I photographed the wind? Now, what was an indirect influence became a direct influence, which now gave me some information about how to photograph the next plate. Now, unfortunately, because I only had 1 plate left, I completely blew the exposure. But I did learn something in that process. I did end up with a better photographic process going forward, even though I didn't necessarily get the image I was expecting. All right, so Let me move that just a second. There we go. All right. So again, like I said, indirect influences come from anywhere. The other piece around influence is, oh wait, I went the wrong way. Did I put that there twice? Hang on here. I got to move my Zoom slide. My Zoom window is blocking me again. I'm going to move that down. There we go. Now I can see what I'm doing here. All right. All right. You can also have a negative influence. And in that example I just gave, the wind at one point was both indirect but also negative. But there are a lot of things that have a massive negative influence on us. And it can be small, it can be large, but it's really important to sort of recognize that influence because, again, sometimes what we're not is important. And I think it's also important when we're sort of thinking about why we're responding something to the way, why we respond something. Try that whole sentence again. Why we respond to something the way we do is if there's a negative influence. I don't like the location. I don't like the sounds around me. I don't like the traffic. That one of the things that can happen to us is if we acknowledge the negative influence, we can oftentimes let that then sort of wash over our creative process and we can continue to work. And so it's also one of the things that we can then prep for as well. I photographed with somebody and you all were talking about the owl that's down there. We have a little spot about an hour north of me and we have a bunch of short-eared owls. And they live out on those flats, and in the wintertime, you can go up there and pretty much every day you've got a shot at getting some really nice owls out there hunting for the mice and the voles and stuff. But I photographed with a guy up there, and he literally, if his hands get cold, he creatively shuts down. The cold is a massive negative influence on him. And so he's got all these amazing gloves now. If you ever need glove help, he's tried like every glove at REI. But gloves where he's got little heating packets in them and stuff to keep his hands warm because he knows as soon as things get cold, everything is now a problem. Nothing works. The camera doesn't work. The focusing doesn't work. When his hands are warm and he's warm, everything works great. So knowing what your negative influences are just helps you also set yourself up to be successful or more successful, or when they do rear their ugly head, you can sort of let them wash over yourself because you know, oh, this is something I can move on and process. So influence fun. So this is the other part about influence. And this is the part that, like, when I started digging into influence, this was the part where I was like, okay, we have something magical going on here. Because I sat down and I thought what would be fun would be to write down everything I could think of that was an influence. And I thought that's going to be pretty easy. And I thought I'll even make it easy. I'll start with, mom and dad, my brother, my partner, where I live, my house, my job. And then I looked over, I have 400 photo books in my studio. I was like, there's 400 books of influence. I have about 800 albums that I own. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of influence there. And I thought about every teacher I've ever had. I thought about every person I've talked to. I thought about the cars I've had. I thought about the jobs I had. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, everything has some level of a potential influence to it. And so what I tried to do after that was like, oh, are there ones that I think about, though, that are significant and ones that could then be practically applied into what I'm doing? So one of those massive influences for me is, and it's here, it's like in this exercise, find something not photography related and use that as an influence. So jazz music, improvisation in street photography, a painter's audacious use of color to work in a photograph. Just something's out there that's an influence I'm going to apply. Well, for me, one of the big musical influences for me, and we don't have to have the argument if you disagree because we'll be short on time, but the jazz album Kinda Blue by Miles Davis is the greatest jazz album of all time. And it's absolutely one of the most amazing improv albums of all time. And that Miles Davis as a musician has a huge influence on me. There's something about the music, the cadence, even when it's songs that are cheering up beat, you get the melancholy behind his addiction that's behind it. There's just this multi-layer fascination for me to that music. And I have Miles on a lot in the studio. And I have a number of different images that were Miles driven. And once I realized, like, oh, Miles is an influence, but how's that show up in my work? And what I tried to do is chase improvisation in my photography. Now, in the street work, it was pretty easy. I could go down and pretend like I was Cartier-Bresson and look for decisive moments and little things happening and call it improv. But I'm not normally, I wouldn't consider myself a street photographer. I dabble in street photography. It's like my hobby is street photography. As a landscape photographer, though, how do you do improvisation in the landscape? Like, what would that look like? What would a photograph that had improvisation feel like against other images? And that was not an easy question for me to figure out, but I knew that influence. And so one of the things that came out of that was I also recognized the influence of music on my work as a whole. And so this body of work here. So this is a body of work that I had up in a gallery here a couple of months ago. And this is, give you the first couple here. In my world, this is musical annotation, musical notes. It's a symphony of color. And so these are really soft gradations. These images are printed huge. They're printed 30 by 40, 40 by 60 in size. And then, we get through these, and then eventually we hit these images. And these images are small. They're a little, they're roughly 9 by 9, 10 by 10 in size. And you can see there's a chaos to them. There's a chaotic nature to them. There's intentional camera movement. There's post-production blur in them. There's all sorts of things going on there to create that effect. And then we sort of return back to this serene, sort of softer palette. Well, what I realized was not just in taking pictures, but in putting bodies of work together, I could use that influence of Miles and music in there. So those smaller images that get chaotic and the pieces move and there's camera movement and blur, that is the improvisation during a jazz album. So the normal music is the rhythm, the cadence, and the tradition, and then we move off into a riff somewhere, and that riff takes us wherever it goes, into another riff, and then eventually we come back down into the actual music. And recognizing that was a huge influence on me, that piece. So when I did my artist talk at the gallery, I explained that sort of was my thinking behind that. And it was really fascinating because two of the people who came were big jazz people. And they were like, oh my gosh, I don't get the whole music thing. But like when I look at after you explained it and I looked across the room, I was like, oh my gosh, that is a moment of it, what a riff improv would do. And so that connection to that influence became pretty significant for me. Now, another one is, real quick, I'll give you the little image here. This is an image from Minor White. This is Frost on Glass. And Minor White is a massive influence for me. So much so that I went out and photographed this series.
Dan, you're not sharing.
Of course I'm not, because, I'm talking and then I forget. So let's reshare. All right, so we'll go back here. So this is an image of, thank you, Jeff. This is an image of Frost that Minor White shot. Then in my world, I went out and photographed this. So these images are all directly influenced by Minor White and that shot of ice. But every one of these was taken within about 10 minutes of each other. And what they are is I was in a junkyard, and they're the cracked glass on the windshields. But when I walked by the first one, and the first one I saw was this one right here, I was like, oh my gosh, that looks like a shard of ice. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's Minor. That was Minor seeing that. So I knew the influence at that point. I saw that. I remembered Minor's piece. So that was knowing the influence became really important at this point. Because once I had the influence, I knew Minor had the ice. Then when I went out to create that body of work, I had structure around it. I had an idea of what to do around it. Now, these images don't look like Minor's images, and the subject matter is completely different. But knowing that influence helped me define what I was doing in that moment and let me, for the 10 or 15 minutes I was there, have this really small micro project that turned into something that I really liked. I really enjoyed. I actually have some of these printed and hanging in my studio. And it's on my gallery on my website. But that influence became central. That became key to me sort of understanding what I was doing and what I was working on. This other one here, just this other gallery here, this is a set of dunes. So similar thing. It was just a trip. This is along the Oregon coast. We hit down there where some of the dunes are and just stopped and made some images. Again, not necessarily my favorite work, not necessarily my greatest work, but one of the reasons I have it here and have it up on the site for the gallery for viewing is I look at this work and I can see 8 or 9 different influences on me that had me create this work. I can see both the Westons, Brett and Edward, in this work. I can see Dick Arndt's platinum palladium printing help me get the toning and style. I can see the influence, again, of some of the musicians and some of the music I listen to. I get the influence, again, it's a little bit of Ansel's in there. I get the experience of sort of thinking about some of the books I've read, some of the literature I've read, that sort of fits in there. So again, recognizing all those different moments pulls me into a different spot, a different point of connection within that realm. So again, something to do. You could come into an image, you could come into a body of work and find an influence and go work on that influence in your photography. I think you'd be surprised at how good your images are when you identify the influence and go shoot with the influence in mind. It's a weird subconscious process we go into where you're almost seeding a good idea. You're planting a seed and all of a sudden you go out to photograph and it just sort of works in your subconscious. And all of a sudden you'll come home and you're like, wow, those images really, I got a lot of really good images today, because that subconscious influence is now helping you determine the micro decisions we make. We grab that camera and we move a little left, a little right, we change the shutter speed. All those things matter. And that influence is floating around consciously now in our back mind makes this difference in the sort of the subjective choices we make. I think another one that's a really great exercise to do if you're talking about influence and approaching influence and thinking about that is grab 10, 15, 20 of your favorite photographs. And then in detail, write down all the common themes you see in that work. Subject matter. How do you compose? Do you put things in the center? Are you a person who likes edge tension? Do you use a lot of saturation? Are you a more pastel person? Are you black and white? Do you use a lot of diagonal lines? Are you a foreground, midground, background person? Or are you just a midground, background person? What do you do? Whatever you do is great. But then spend some time thinking about where could that have come from? What might you have seen? Who might you have talked to? What might you have read that's sort of influencing how you're approaching your photography? Because again, you never know where the influence comes from. But when you start to figure out what the influence might be, we move it from a passive behavior to an active behavior. And in the end, what we really need to do is get active with this process. So imitation, influence are really great, and they sit there. And if we don't think about them, when we don't utilize them, they're just this passive little stream that runs beneath our feet. But when we get engaged with them and we interact with them, they become something different. Because at the end of the day, inspiration, this is the one that everybody asks me about. They're like, oh, I just can't get inspired. Inspiration is so hard. And I'm like, pick up your camera and go outside and take 20 photographs. And they're like, well, if I do that, I'm going to spend 4 hours photographing. I'm like, yeah, because inspiration is in the work. Everybody wants to know where you find your inspiration. You find your inspiration in your work. And so what we want to do is use imitation and influence to drive us towards work. How do I use an influence? What did I hear? What can I photograph with that? How is that impacting my photograph? How is that impacting my processing? So that when I then do pick up the camera, when I do then sit down in front of the computer, I am in a good position to let that work start to bring out who I am. The uniqueness in who I am, the uniqueness in how I process and show up allows for that work to create. The great part about inspiration is if we're thinking about it in the context of this continuum we're on, we start to remove the other piece, which is the inner critic of judgment against the work we create. Because one of the other pieces that's really amazing when you start to focus in on how you are influenced in your work and how you're imitating work and how you're inspired in your own work is that, again, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. but it also becomes something that allows us to accept failure in a really significant way. So our inner critic, which is telling us, are we doing good? Are we doing bad? If we are doing good, it's telling us we're doing bad. If we're doing bad, it tells us that we're not doing bad enough. Whatever it tells you, whatever its story is inside your head. And for me, it's really annoying because it wants to be right all the time. That's my inner critic. It's a rightness thing for me. And it thinks it's smarter than me, which is ironic because it's me. So I guess I think I'm smarter than myself sometimes. But I used that knowledge just as a sidebar as I'm detracting myself from my point here. But one of the ways I found to silence my inner critic was I went back and looked at sort of, again, influences, things that did that. And I love science, but I suck at science. So like if there's a pop culture book for science, like I'll go read A Brief History of Time because I can't understand any of the physics behind it. I had calculus 2 in college and literally my head exploded on the first day. I could not, he's like, we're going to do this cone rotating in 3-dimensional space. And I'm like, I'm out. So, but I love pop science things. So knowing that, I was like, oh, I can just tell my ego and my inner critic when it gets there. I'm like, I bet you can't solve pi. So it's like, yeah, 31.4567. And then off it goes trying to solve for pi. And it quiets itself. So knowing the influence of pop science on myself, I can use that to help me even just stay motivated in my inspirational world by silencing the inner critic. So all these little pieces sort of come into play. But that failure notion, we don't have to respond to failure in the same way because it just becomes a point of inspiration. It becomes a point of influence, of just an awareness that I have for something. And one of the examples I have for that is I'm going to switch over here. And this is one of my favorite little exercises when I first started playing with imitation and influence. I'll come into Photoshop here. As I have this very long exposure. This is over Mount Baker up north of Seattle. I finally got my star tracker to align north and I just let it ride for way too long. So I have a lot of stars here. But I was fascinated. One of my first imitation assignments was going to be Starry Night by Van Gogh. Because or Van Gogh for those of you from Europe. So it's one of the things for Van Gogh that really always has amazed me is Van Gogh's attention to the quality of light. And that's the things Van Gogh saw. And I thought how cool it would have been to see that stuff. As a person who doesn't do hallucinogenics, I thought it would still be really cool to be able to see things like that. So how would I do that? What technique could I use? How would I approach working on that? So I realized, oh, I can come into a Photoshop image, when I can come down and play with like a twirl distort, and apply that. Oh, great. Now I killed Photoshop. Photoshop's going to restart for a second. It died. But that twirl is going to make those swirls that we would kind of see in Starry Night. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got a way to come in here and do this. And I'm not a good painter. I'm a terrible painter. I've actually bought canvases and paintbrushes before, but it just doesn't work out. So let's try this again here. Let's do a filter and let's do a distort. Let's do a twirl. All right, we'll set the angle there. Okay, and you can see there now I start to get just the swirl effect. I could come in and make a selection and then actually apply that twirl into that selection there. So I can distort, hit that one spot. Get a good nice little twirl in there. And you can see the twirl start to form in there. So again, am I successful? No, I wouldn't say I was successful. Did I get to play with a filter that no, you don't get to find things. Do I get to play with a technique I had never thought of before? Sure. Is it fun? Yeah. Am I more excited when things are fun? Absolutely. And so that was one of the things that sort of getting to play with these various tools and these various concepts allowed me to expand the breadth of how I approach my work as well. Because the other piece for me that's sort of interesting, and I went through this experience in my own photographic practice, and I hear it from a lot of other photographers, where there's a point of at different times where we're very prolific sometimes in our photography. And then other times we're not super prolific in our photography. And it can become easy to get discouraged. I haven't picked up my camera in a long time. I haven't processed photographs. I've got this backlog. Or a couple of years ago, it's been probably 7 years now, but my little brother passed away. I went back in my Lightroom catalog, and that year he passed away, I think I have 6,000 photos like in my Lightroom catalog, which is not very many for me. I mean, for some people that may be a lot. For me, I didn't take hardly any photographs, recognizing that my life was in a spot where I just didn't want to pick up the camera. And so we go through these ebbs and flows and these ups and downs. But one of the things too, that when we hold imitation and particularly influence on us, is we realize that even if I'm not picking up my camera, even if I'm not working inside a Lightroom, or I'm not making prints, or I'm not doing something, everything is now becoming fuel for my creative practice, fuel for my photography. I don't know what's going to happen when I go out and photograph again, but I'm going to be better prepared because more things have happened. The book, The Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck's kind of classic. As an English major, you learn pretty quickly, if you are only concerned about the Job family's trip to California, you only have to read every other chapter and you can pass your test. Because one chapter is on the describing of the land, the other chapter is on the family story. But one of the things I realized that's influencing me with The Grapes of Wrath is that notion of there's the description of the land, and then there's the narrative of the story of the family. That, oh, when I sequence photographs, that's a way I could sequence photographs. That's an influence on me. That's a way to approach things. That is my photography. And so it gave me a really cool way to always feel like I was connected to my creative practice, always connected to my process in a significant, meaningful way. And so for me, that's why I love sort of having these conversations. I love doing, like I said, the group exercise and working on these things, because I do think it allows us to stay connected and engaged with our work in a really cool way. All right. I left a little. I want to make sure I left a little time for questions or anything like that. If not, I can show you weird things to do in Photoshop that also make things look like Van Gogh, I guess. So,
Yeah, well, you're talking to one that does a lot of weird stuff too. So this has been really interesting so far. I'm fascinated with it. Anybody have questions? Speak up.
Well,
Don't be
I
so
have
quiet.
one comment, if I may. One thing that I wrote down that you said that I thought was interesting was you find your inspiration in your work. You find your
Yeah.
inspiration in your work. And to do that, you have to go out and do work. I mean, you have to go out and shoot, first of all. And I'm thinking in the wintertime, I'm struggling, but as I'm thinking, I'm coming up with a couple ideas of things to shoot. And I don't know if it's going to turn out, but just you got to go out and you got to do the work.
Yeah, and that's two things that I completely agree that we have to find that element. And I'm like that. I've got a lot going on. There's certain times of the year, my teaching, like right now at the school, I've got 2 classes. I live on an island. I've got a long commute in. We've got the Foundations of Photoshop Virtual Summit, which if you haven't registered for, go to my homepage, danieljgrady.com, top of the page, register for free Photoshop training. Always want to see people at the summits. But I actually had these leaves in my studio, and the other day I had to get them in front of a softbox. I was backlighting them, shooting them for silhouettes, because I hadn't shot in a while, and I sort of needed that to happen. But the other piece I sort of recognize, and this goes a little bit to influence and as well, is I was broken by a mentor a number of years ago. It's probably been 15, 20 years ago now, who said in passing, I don't think they meant it in a negative way or whatever, but they said, if you're not behind the camera, if you're not taking pictures behind the camera, you're not a photographer. And I think, the intention was there is you got to make pictures. If you're a photographer, you got to go out and make pictures. And for 10, 12, it's been 8. Yeah, for almost 12 years, that was paralyzing to me. Because I desperately wanted to feel like a photographer and be a photographer. But yet, if I went a month or a week, or it was cold here and it rained for a month and I didn't want to go out and get my camera wet or whatever, I was like, I'm not a photographer. And it would really upset me. And to the point my partner's like, dude, you got to get over this. Like, this is a hang up. And then one day I was sitting in my studio. It was pouring rain outside. And I was flipping through Magnum Contact Sheets, one of my absolute favorite books to sort of flip through. If you've never seen that book, it's absolutely worth getting from the library or ordering. It's Magnum Photographers. It's their old film contact sheets. And you see the picture on the left that was picked off the contact sheet. But on the right, you see all the images that were on the roll of film around that. It's hugely inspirational because you realize that a lot of times they suck really bad too. And a roll of 36 rolls, there's like one great photograph and 35 bad ones. So it's a little inspirational that way. But in the process of looking at that book, what I realized was like, oh, I'm looking at these photographs. I'm studying these photographs. I'm learning how to make better photographs. Oh, I'm in my old photographs and I'm editing them, re-editing them, processing them, making them better. And what I realized was what I really wanted was not to be a photographer, but I wanted a life in photography. I wanted a life where photography was important to me and significant to me. And so all of a sudden it was like, oh, I don't have to be behind the camera anymore. All of a sudden, looking at photographs, talking about photographs sort of filled that void. And I think that's an important thing for you to remember that in thinking about your comment is, yeah, it's important to get out and do the work, but also recognizing that for me and the way I work, looking at a photo book is part of my work. Listening to music and figuring out how to apply that in the future is part of my work. Re-editing images in Lightroom is part of my work. I go back to old images and reprocess them, or printing them again is part of my work. And by expanding my definition of work, it really opened me up to be, I think, a lot more creative and a lot more excited about it when I do pick up the camera, because I've been able to incorporate, again, more influence, more stimulus, and more input into that process. So I don't know if that helps, but just something to think about.
Interesting. Yeah. Tony, go ahead.
What you were saying about, I can't relate it right now, but many years ago, one of my grandsons taking trumpet in school, and a famous trumpeter came to the area, one of the music stores, for a little seminar, and I took him to that. And somebody asked the question, what is the hardest part of getting to practice? And the trumpeter said, opening the box, or the case. He said the case was always over in a corner in the room, and he'd sit at his desk, and he figured it out, so he brought it and placed the trumpet on the floor next to his chair out of the box. And that caused him to, get on with the practice.
Yeah. No, that's a great story. I have a friend up on the island I live on. He's at times is this incredibly prolific painter. Mm-hmm. And then other times you won't see a painting or hear a drop from him for months, a year, or whatever. And then this prolific onslaught. So the last time he got really cranked up, I went by his studio and I was like, what jump started you? And I'm like, and not only that, you completely rearranged your studio. And he has a gallery and then his actual working studio. They're in one big, huge kind of warehouse. And he's like, oh, I moved my desk. Used to be up front. When he walked in the door, that's where his desk was, so he could do bills and invoices or whatever. He goes, I moved that to the very back of the studio. So now I have to walk by all the painting tables. And I always leave the paint out the night before and brushes. He goes, so when I walk by, if I see something, I'm like, oh, I can paint that. I'll start to paint a little bit. And I never make it back to the computer to get on Facebook or whatever. He's like, I've got the worst problem now, though. He goes, sometimes I'm like a week behind on bills and invoices because I never make it back to the computer just by changing the place where his desk was in the studio. So yeah, we got to do what we got to do to pick up the camera. Jay Maisel told me a number of years ago that he, outside every room in his house, he had a camera hanging on a little hook. Mm. So if he was walking by and the light looked good in that room, the camera was right there. He didn't have to go find the camera because he's like, I never would have. So he just had a camera everywhere around in his in the vault out there in New York.
Yeah. For my son-in-law's birthday or Christmas present, I got him the book. What do you say, F-64 or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I read a couple of chapters before it was time to give it to him. Just fascinating of the styles and what they were thinking of, their influences and whatever, and the imitation process. And
yeah, and that book in particular, if you haven't ever looked at that F-64 group and that West Coast tradition in the history of photography starts in the art period of modernism. but they were in many ways a negative influence of pictorialism, the thing before them, in a response to that, plus the influences and working with Stieglitz and all that, and that transition. So it's a really fascinating history read in photography. Particularly now, we're seeing a little bit of a swing back towards some pictorial movements and a re-examination of some of those concepts. So it's a really fascinating time. It's a great book to read if you're interested in the history at all.
Yeah, what I remember of that book was they wanted to get out of New York to get away from Stiglitz's influence.
Yep.
And so to do it, they moved and turned out to be good for them. Anyway.
Yeah, and Imogene Cunningham, one of the amazing members of that group, she actually lived up here in Seattle and worked for the Seattle Times. And she had gone down and photographed a couple of nudes of her husband by a little reflecting pool down by Mount Rainier. And somehow the paper found out she had photographed a male nude, and they were going to fire her for indecency. And she came home and told her husband they were moving to San Francisco because Seattle was too conservative for her. And so that's how she ended up down there hanging out with all of them.
Any other questions, comments?
What are all of the books that you would recommend that would done by photographers that of historical value?
Wow. Of individual photographers or like the history of photography?
Well, either or. I mean, I haven't read one book by, that didn't talk about how to set your camera or how to take the picture, but more like you're talking about the Magnum contact sheets.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
What other books would be similar?
All right. Yeah. So Magnum Contact Sheets. There's another book called Contact Sheets, which is not Magnum photographers, but very similar, which is a great read. There's a couple of other books that are really about sort of how to look at and examine and think about sort of almost in the critique concept of photographs. Stephen Shore has a book called The Nature of Photographs. It doesn't have a lot of text in it, but it's a methodology of sort of how to look at and think about and sort of dissect a photograph. And he talks a lot about time and frame notions in there. It's a simple read, but very deep. Once you sort of internalize what Stephen's talking about, it's pretty amazing. John Zarkowski was the curator of the MoMA in New York. And he has two books that I think are really excellent along the same vein about sort of how do you understand and critique and evaluate photographs. One is called The Photographer's Eye. And then the other one is used. You can pick it up at used bookstores or off at Abe's. Amazon probably has used copies or whatever. But it's called Looking at Photographs. And it's 100 photographs out of the MoMA. And John, who was the curator of the MoMA, describes sort of why that photograph was important, why it was selected, what he sort of sees and experiences in the photograph. Those are really good ones. Here, let me get give me 1 second here. I'm going to get my other book list up. There we go. Um, let's see. Oh, those are really nerdy. Hang on, those are nerd science books. More second here. Hold on one more second. Let me get up my other list here. Newhall is the one who wrote most of the photo history books. Those are pretty limited in their kind of focus, the history of photography, Beaumont Newell, who wrote a lot of them. I think there's some other history books, like there's a book called Photography, a Cultural History, by Mary Marion, which is an interesting sort of history of photography. She also has and that's in several editions, but that's a pretty good history book. If you're a street photographer interested in street photography at all, there's a book called Bystander, which is Joe Merowitz and Colin Westbeck's History of Street Photography. That's a really interesting book. If you want to sort of read an interesting take on sort of photography and thinking about photography, my photo book club this month is reading Henry Cartier-Bresson's The Mind's Eye, which is a really great read of Cartier-Bresson's sort of methodology and concepts and approach to working with photography. That's another good one. Trying to think of a couple of other ones that are in there that would be good. Trying to think of the ones that aren't super heady. Like if you ask the search engines, they tell you like Roland Barthes, Camera Lucida are on photography by Susan Sontag, and those are pretty academic in reading. They lack some fun in that approach. Let me pull together a list of a couple other ones, and what I'll do is I'll break it down by subject matter a little bit, and I'll send it over to Jeff, and he can forward it out to everybody. Because I've got like my list of color in books up, like Joseph Enton's The Interactions of Color, John Cage's Color and Culture, and there's a bunch of different topics. But let me pull together some sections in there. My main book list is on my iPad at home. All my books are cataloged on there, and that's what I was looking to see if I had it synced to my Mac, but I don't. So while I'm not pulling great things off my head, I'll forward Jeff here in the next week or so a list of a bunch of books to send out.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, one resource we have here in Milwaukee is the Milwaukee Art Museum. And down in the basement, they have a whole section devoted to photography. And they bring in some different photographers, some better known than others. And every time I'm in there, it's just thinking about what they were doing and how they were doing it. And it's just, to me, it's very inspirational. And I recommend that to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, because I think the other thing, when you go into a museum in particular, or a center for photography like ICP in New York, or the Tucson Center down at U of A, where they house a bunch of West Coast artists, is you can also talk to the curators, and you can talk to the people who work there sort of about the work and why is it there and what's significant about it. Because one of the really interesting things when we look at photography and the history of photography is, and I'm going to pick on Robert Adams, and I'll pick on Stephen Shore. So Robert Adams, if you have never looked at Robert Adams' work, Robert Adams is in response to Ansel. Ansel made pretty pictures of Yosemite. Robert made pictures of clear cut. Ansel made pictures of the Sierra Nevadas. Robert Adams photographed. Here is the suburbia expansion sprawl outside Denver, Colorado. It comes out of in the history, it comes out of a thing called the New Topographics. And so it was a different look. Ansel was saying, look, nature's pretty, we need to preserve it. And Robert was like, no, look what you're actually doing to nature. You're chopping down all the trees and you're expanding the city and going into all these pristine environments. Stephen Shore, we come back and you're looking at photographs where you're like, it's a guy standing on a street corner next to a 7-Eleven, and it's a motel sign. And so we look at them today, photographs that were taken now 50, 60 years ago, and we're like, why is that important? Well, because nobody did that before then. We're looking at that New Topographics was a brand new way of seeing through the camera. We look at it now 50, 60 years later, and it seems sort of like, well, that's trite. Everybody's photographed clear cuts. Everybody's photographed suburbia. But up until that point, that hadn't happened. And so that's one of the cool parts about going to a museum, is they can help give you the context to sort of understand the significance of those photographs given when the photographs were taken, not just in the sensibility of how we look at them today. It's one of the hardest things when you look at photographs is remembering to look at them both in the context of what they were then, and then how do we view them under the modern era and the modern lens of cultural and social and justice situations we have today impact that, but also when they were taken, why and were they significant then, even though they may not seem that way now. And it makes for a great conversation. And I think that's one of the beauties of going to a museum is they can help with that conversation. So great suggestion.
Anybody else? Well, this has really been an interesting evening and a little deeper, a little different subject than we're normally used to. And I've been trying to find some of this kind of stuff. So Daniel, it really is inspiring to think about ways to do this stuff. So
well, cool. And yeah, no, and thank you for letting me come and talk about this because, you know, I know it's exciting to talk about, you know, trips and processing and Photoshop and better ways to get this and that and go to Africa and all that. So, but I appreciate you all sticking with me on imitation influence and inspiration because it's exciting for me and I hope to get everybody else excited about it too. So I appreciate you all hanging tough with me tonight. So
yeah, well, it's I think I'm trying to find a lot of different stuff like this, and this was great because yeah, we talk about Photoshop and Lightroom and all these other things, but we don't get into this kind of topics too often, and I think it's fascinating when we do. So I thank you for coming and doing it. I think everybody else probably enjoyed it as well. So
Thank you, Daniel.
yep, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So with that, thanks, and you can stick around if you want. Sounds like you've got other stuff you've got to do.
Yeah, my class actually they had to do a written homework assignment that they then had to come and share as in small groups. They're doing a workflow a written exercise for how they're going to do their workflow in Lightroom, and I'm making them write it on paper before they implement it. And they're in small groups right now, so I'm sure they don't want me back because they're probably right now doing whatever they want. So, but I probably should go check on them.
Yep.
Thank you. It was very interesting.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Yep,
Thanks.
thanks everybody.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
Thank you. Well
Bye.
done.
Thank you.
Bye. All right.
The cat
With
has
that,
the
I'll
last
turn
word.
it over to you, Elizabeth.
All right. Well, we can do the pretty much the club news first, which actually is going to come back to you for Wacko. Any Wacko updates?
Wacko updates. The only thing we have is Mike Moats, first weekend in March. It's $15. For those of you that have signed up already, thank you. If you haven't, sign up. It's a good morning from 9 to noon on close-up photography in both nature and just regular photography. The neat part with Mike is that he does this all with normal camera equipment. You don't have to go out and buy anything. You should have all the equipment you need right now. So he's a great speaker, and just go to the Wacko website and you can sign up. We got plenty of room, and yeah, do it. It's not more than what it costs you to have a lunch. So
I just signed up on Sunday, I think,
yep.
before the price went up. I don't know when it was, but I was going to get in before it went up.
Yep, hasn't gone up yet, but probably going up soon. So,
Yeah.
I mean, March is coming so quick. It's hard to believe that we're in the first week of February already.
Oh, thank God. Thank God January's over. All right. Who has updates for PSA? Oh, Jeff, look, your name's there as a PSA club.
Jeez, I get it again. PSA, we have the Wisconsin chapter. Their next meeting is in March. It's with Brenna Nicole. She's going to be talking about probably night photography. I'm still working on figuring out exactly what she's going to talk at that particular meeting. Their May meeting is actually a field trip to Green Bay. So that's going to be an interesting one for the group. Close, but there's a ton of stuff to do in Green Bay, is from what I'm hearing. And I normally end up going to Door County, but Green Bay still has a lot of stuff all on its own. That's really about it. They have their photo festival in fall. I believe that one's going to be in Las Vegas this time.
Yep.
Which
Okay.
actually, some people laugh that it's going to be in Vegas, but Las Vegas has a lot of great nature stuff all around the city, all within 15 minutes to an hour drive. You can get into the a mountain area, and a lot of red rocks and Valley of Fire, all that kind of stuff is there. Hoover Dam is there as well. So besides all the street lights that you get in downtown Las Vegas, so
Yep.
Can be a lot of fun. I've gone there. God, I must have been to Vegas 40, 50 times, and it's always been a lot of fun. Used to be cheap. Now it's getting a little expensive, but I think that's about all I've got for PSA from.
All right. So before we get to the February images, just a reminder that March.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Do we have any new members? I don't remember seeing Trish Zamora before, or you just I'm just inquiring because I need to know sometimes.
Well, I've been on a couple of times, but never as a panelist because I haven't been able to figure out the technology. But yeah, I'm kind of new.
Okay.
Tricia, that's always been my fault. I'm the one that's supposed to bring you in, and once we get a meeting going, I sometimes don't look in the box for attendees to get you transferred over. So
no, that's okay.
But I'm not sure that she's on my list for the newsletter. So
probably not yet, because she's
okay.
Just been a guest so far.
Okay.
She'll be next year's vice president for us.
No, I'm just a paranoid person, basically. So I go, wait, I know those names, but I don't know that one. So
yep.
Am I missing something?
No, or I have you now, and it's fine. So let's just talk now. Ada?
Yeah. So it was just I kept missing her, and so she's been able to watch, but not able to talk.
I'll shut up.
So, we'll get that worked out yet. I'm slowly working on that. So.
All right, and I guess that's a good point. I should always ask for that. Are there any other new people here today?
I don't think I see any of the ones that have contacted me right now. So I try to watch and make sure that we know about them.
All right. Okay, so before we get to February, then just a quick reminder that in March, our show and tell is Brian and Clint. And our President's Challenge will be colorful food. I decided I wanted to learn food photography, so that's why that's in there. It hasn't gone well yet. I haven't started, but I guess I should. Guess I should now. So that will be coming up in March. For this month in February, we do have the outing to do the tabletop at Holy Cross Church.
May I say a few things about that?
Please do.
Okay. So that is February 14th. So that'll be a week from Saturday at Holy Cross Lutheran Church in the Falls. So we did this last year as kind of an activity, something to do in the wintertime. And we had a good number of people that came out. We had a good variety of objects to shoot, flowers and little doodads. And so it really worked out well. So this year, again, we're going to do it. Doors are going to open at 9:45. And then we're going to be shooting until about noon. So the entry spot is on the extreme southwest part of the parking lot. There's a fob reader there. I have the fob, and hopefully the doors, once I open it, will be able to keep them closed, keep them open, so I don't have to just stand there all the time. But I think that'll work out. So we've got last year, I think we had somewhere around 12 people, maybe 8 tables. So this year we are gonna have 8 tables. I'd asked for 8. So they're gonna be set up around the perimeter. Um, the preschool kids will be in there Friday, so the tables around the perimeter. So we're being asked then to, bring them to the floor. It's a huge space. Set them up, and then at the end, ask people to return them to where they got them along the perimeter. So what's important for this to be successful is that we have you folks who participate to bring flowers and other doodads, small things, similar to what we had last year. Just curious, how many people are interested in participating in this? Let's see. How many hands? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Everything keeps shifting on me.
I know. That's why
I
I'm
think
not
I
even
saw about
bothering.
6 hands, Jane. Okay, 7. So good. So it should be fun. One question that I had was, let's see, Patty, is Patty on here?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you have all the things that you were given last year?
Yeah, all that glassware with the lights.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. And I was going to ask if there would be someone else who could store those this year. So they have been sitting in the middle of my living room floor since I dropped them off last year. So I have no place to put them.
It's a nice coffee table.
Oh, it's
I'm living in an apartment, so
I've been using them to rehouse spiders. It's just the right height to set my spiders on while I rehouse them. So
well, bring them in and maybe we can get somebody, we can talk somebody into helping
okay.
store them for the future.
Yeah, it's like 4 banker boxes.
Okay. And we can help you bring that stuff in.
Okay.
Okay. Any
Appreciate it.
questions
Thank
about
you.
this?
Brian,
It should be a lot of
I'm
fun.
sorry.
It was fun last year. I'm sorry.
I'll miss it because that's my daughter's birthday party is that day. So I'm sorry I'll miss that. So
Oh.
have fun.
Happy birthday to your daughter.
I'll tell her.
Anything else? Questions? Okay. Look forward to seeing you all on a week from Saturday.
All right. Thank you for the info. Show and tell. Bob and Roger. Who would like to go first? Or I'll pick one.
I can go first.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. See if I can share properly. Okay. Two. I'm halfway there. Okay. Is everybody looking at the Oregon US 30 sign?
Yes.
Okay, good. I decided that for my pictures for this year, I'd share the ones that I took when I went out to Portland, Oregon for the PSA festival. And the places that I went to and my wife and I went to while we were out there, we flew out and rented a car. And our first day out there, we went up along the Columbia River Gorge. and drove on the US 30, which is an old 2-lane road that's getting in bad need of repair, and they're doing construction on it right now. But that's what everybody travels on to see the falls along the gorge. And this is probably the most famous one, Multnomah Falls. And here's one of my pictures of imitation for the famous one that most everyone's seen. And I think it turned out pretty well. I did have to remove a number of people off the bridge. And the next falls that we saw was Horsetail Falls. And here's my shot of that. And there were there's about 5 other falls along this part of the drive that we did not stop at because I took pictures of them last time I was here. But to give you an idea as to what kind of shape the road is in, this is the railing that's quite common all along the road. And it's all covered in moss. And at the end of this road, there's a place called the Vista House, which someone built
Roger, excuse me, that previous photo, that was black, so that was blackened by the fire, right? Those posts are black, so they look like they were burned from that fire a couple years ago.
No,
No?
that's just some dark lichen on it.
Okay.
It's
Oh, it is
concrete with
concrete, right,
dark
yeah.
lichen and green lichen.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So the Vista House is kind of a entertainment venue now. It overlooks a good part of the river and has a stone floor and stained glass windows. After we went along the Highway 32, we went into downtown Portland to the Japanese gardens. And I've got a few shots from there. A number of nice little scenes. There's some dripping water that makes the bamboo rock. And I remember in my younger years, I said, someday I'm going to build one of those. I never have. Some Japanese traditional textures and stuff. And from this garden, you could see overlooking Portland and Mount Hood on a good day. Just down the hill from the Japanese gardens is the International Rose Gardens. So even though it's in September, there are quite a few very nice blooms. I'm sure that in June, there's probably a lot greater density of beautiful blooms. This one is kind of a lucky shot. I shot it at 1/60th of a second, and the bee's not perfectly sharp, but at 1/60th of a second, that's pretty good. Couple of blossoms just ready to open. some back highlighting. Now, the next day, I went by myself on one of the PSA paid outings, and we went to Cannon Beach, which is about a 3-hour drive away. And on the way, we stopped at a place called Camp 18. And I thought the contrast in technology here was pretty fun. But at Camp 18, they had a restaurant, and they had all kinds of stuff through a field that were great photographic subjects. And so there were old engines. And whoops, give me a second here. And collections of things like old chainsaws. There was a collection also of broken axe heads, which I didn't get a very good picture of that. There are a couple of vehicles like a old fire truck. There's a small stream there, and a couple of leaves were coming down in early fall here. This one really hasn't changed color too much, but and if you notice right under the center of the leaf, you can see my head reflected in the water. Here's an old boiler to one of those steam engines that they had. Kind of neat to see ferns growing in it. And then if you've got a shop and you've ever needed a larger bandsaw, here's one for doing whole logs.
Wow.
And so the blade is made so that you can pull it off, turn it around, and destroy the second set of teeth on it after you're done with the first set of teeth. And then we went on to Cannon Beach. Like I say, with imitation, this is kind of a classic shot. I saw a mother and her daughter out there playing in the water. And we were there at low tide, and here are some sea anemones that are actually out of the water and curled up. There's one on the left bottom that's still underwater with all of its tentacles still out. And there are a lot of interesting patterns in the sand. Sand was very hard. And here are your classic sunset pictures at Cannon Beach with the reflection of the rocks in the shallow water sweeping up on shore. And one more. This was at a 15th of a second, so the water's kind of frothy, wispy. The next day, we went out for a walk right around the hotel. And this was a short ways away at a yacht club. And so everybody's got a similar sailboat, and I liked the way all of the masts lined up. And then the dock right at the hotel, again, you could see Mount Hood in the distance. And the hotel is on an island, and there's an interstate that crosses the island, and that's the only way in and out. And this is the bridge for it. Kind of interesting how uneven it looks. And then the next day we went across the river, which takes you to Washington State. And there's a historic site there called Fort Vancouver, which was originally established by the East India Trading Company. And they controlled that part of the eastern United States. They were actually, or western part of the United States, they were actually the white man's government for that area for a while, and all the way up into Canada. And a few of the things that they showed here in their garden, just as you entered the fort, I thought were interesting to see at this latitude. Here they were growing, they had some cotton in there. And I wouldn't know it, but these are artichokes. Now this one you'd expect hops. Got a nice shot of a bee, a little bit lower angle. And happened to get a white hibiscus and be able to get a lot of the texture in the petals. Another thing in this garden that I wouldn't expect to see was figs. And here we're entering into the fort. And on one side is all of the stores and the storage and bakery and everything. And then on the other side, there's kind of the officers' quarters and the official meeting rooms. And they had grapes growing all along the front porch. On the other side, they had a kitchen and a person dressed in period costume showing off how they cook things, like with this reflective heater. She was cooking a ham by the fire. This I thought was interesting. I would never know what this is until she explained it to me. They, in order to ship tea, to make it take up the least amount of space, they compressed it into kind of biscuits. And so this is tea. And they had a number of scenes with various things being stored. Here, one of the things there is crash sugar. I don't know what that is. They have brown sugar too. I know that. And here's my last shot in the store where they're selling various things, and what they're bringing in for trade is furs, and they had a pile of furs and scales to weigh the furs to determine how much credit they're going to get to be able to buy stuff in the store. So that's what I have. I'll stop sharing.
That's very cool. I really, really like that leaf in the water.
Oh, Roger, this is
Yeah.
Tony, that it's cracked sugar and oh, I lost the photo. It's dried sugar and compressed and stuff so that when you broke it to have some, it cracked.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
crack off.
All right.
Thanks to Siri.
Sure. I know that they used to sell it a lot in cones, and you'd buy a cone and break up the oh, it's about a 6-inch tall cone of sugar.
Did you just then eat that?
What?
Did you just then eat that?
Well, no, you'd break up as much as you needed to put in whatever dish you
Oh,
were
okay. All right.
cooking.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm picturing like,
But
you know, breaking it up kind of like that hard shell chocolate you get on your ice cream where you crack it, or creme brulee and you crack it, but you eat it right away. So
yeah.
You could do
Well,
the same thing.
I'm sure occasionally the kids got into the sugar and had their way with it.
yeah. Well, very nice. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Bob, are you ready?
I hope so. I'm working on sharing here.
All right.
Can you see my screen?
I see a
Yeah.
bird.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. When my wife and I want to get away for the winter, we tend to find ourselves in one of two places. One is in Arizona in the Tucson area, and the other is in Florida. So seeing it's been cold, I thought I'd share some pictures from our warm weather spots. So these are taken in the, most of them are in the Saguaro East or Saguaro West National Parks around Tucson. Well, this is what's called a curved bill thrasher. This is a desert wren. Now, this is a Gila monster that we came across one day. And when we were leaving the park, we stopped at the park ranger and I said, you know, I got a picture of a couple pictures of a Gila monster today. And all the rangers came over because they said this is extremely rare. I subsequently learned these things live 98% of the time underground. So anyway, they asked for a picture of it because they said, based on its pattern, they can identify them and they track them on a few times that they are sighted. So this is probably for me a once in a lifetime shot.
Cool.
There's quail in the desert. The sunsets in this area in winter seem to be spectacular most days.
Ooh.
As you can tell, I kind of lean towards wildlife. This was a hummingbird that there was huge crowds photographing this thing. And I said, "What's the deal?" And they said, "This bird doesn't belong here. It apparently got blown off a course. It normally is only in California." So it was a first for me to see one this color. Now, this one and the next couple are taken in the Tucson Botanical Garden. They have a house, and I don't know if it's a orchid house that had some butterflies in or a butterfly house that had some orchids in, but it made for some really fun photo opportunities. Another thing we like about this area is that if you're 20, 30 minutes out of town, you have nice dark skies. And I've never seen this many stars in the sky anyplace else. I'm sure they're there, but we usually don't get to see them. Now, this next series is from a place called Whitewater Draw. It's maybe a half hour south of Tombstone. And one of the things we came across was these flocks of yellow-headed blackbirds. And they're just hundreds and hundreds in a flock. And when they get up in the air, it's one of these that's kind of shape-shifting as it moves along. So these were really fun to watch. And this area is a sandhill crane migration destination. And mornings, they all leave to go out and feed. And as the sun comes down, they all come flying back for the night. So this made for some good photo ops as well. These two are gilded flickers. These two were chasing each other low down through the desert, and I ran after them for a good 5 minutes or so until they finally landed, and only got one shot before they took off again, but I was too tired to run anymore. But I really enjoy this picture. I don't know, it just seems like almost like people. Hey, look at me. This is a Plano Pepla, whatever that means. Here's a night where we didn't have much color in the sky, but it was still pretty nice. Now we're moving to Florida. This bird is called an anhinga. We saw a lot of those. This was a heron on the neighbor's roof. Another anhinga. Yet another. This was a raccoon that we came across in a preserve. And these are very rare right now in Florida because the pythons, that problem they have, there's hardly any small animals running around anymore. They've paid people to come in and try to capture and get rid of the pythons, but it's been kind of a tough uphill battle for them. this bird is one I had never heard of, much less seen, but this is called a purple gallinule. And as you can see, they're just about every color you can imagine. They're kind of the size of a small chicken. And what's interesting to me is they have feet like chickens, and they actually run on lily pads across the water. It's pretty interesting to see. Green heron that was down in the shadow, but the sun caught him just right. I got a kick out of this one. This is a heron, and I've never seen one stretched out like this. I think it's almost 6 feet from the tip of his toes to the top of the wing there. They look like much smaller or bigger birds around when you see them normal. And this is the same bird just a few seconds later. Okay. This section of pictures right now, we hired a guide to take us out one morning and one evening in the mangrove islands in the south part of the state, and it was fantastic. The guy knew right where the birds were, and he specialized in taking photographers out, so he also understood how to get us in the right light. So it was a lot of fun. And the guy happened to have retired there from Milwaukee, so we had a great time talking as well as him taking us around. These last 3 or 4 pictures were taken around one of the mangrove islands that had been, by nature, decided upon as the rookery where all the birds came to sleep at night. And we saw literally hundreds of birds fly in, cormorants and ibis and you name it, pelicans. This one, roseate spoonbill, he tried to land 3 or 4 times and they would not let him stay there. So eventually that bird flew away. But all the other birds that came were welcome. So I don't know what was going on. This was a photo I really liked. In addition to just seeing the alligator, if you notice in the back, you can see the kind of S pattern that his tail makes as he was coming across the water. Oh, this is a female anhinga. Some of the birds we saw initially there got the brown crest and neck. Here's one sitting down. They're really quite beautiful birds. And on this trip, I learned that baby alligators have yellow stripes on them. I had no idea, but it was kind of neat coming across this little group of youngsters. And then on our last night in Key West, I put my margarita down and picked up my camera to get a shot of the sunset, which thousands come out every night to watch. And this night did not disappoint.
Well, thanks for sharing.
All
That
right.
I've never seen a female anhinga. They're really cool looking. So I'm glad you had those in there.
Well, thank you. We really had fun on that trip.
Yeah, you have some really good bird pictures and fun birds in there. Makes me anxious for migration to start around here. So winter can be over.
I know. I'm always waiting for the spring warblers and whatnot to come through.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff, do you have the presidents?
Yep. All right, let's hope this works.
Do you know what kind of bird that was in your first picture, Jeff?
Bird that I had in my first picture.
It was that splashing around in the water.
I don't know. They could have been robins. That was at Chicago Botanical Gardens,
Okay.
and they were in a fountain. So yeah, they were just having fun playing in the water.
Yeah, cool. Cool. All right. It is
Elizabeth,
yeah.
I've been trying to think of when would be a good time to go to Port Washington.
I feel like we missed our opportunity.
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought maybe this weekend might still be an opportunity. I don't know how much of a miss there'll be, but at first I was going to suggest we do it on Saturday, and then I looked at my calendar, and the Wacko meeting is on Saturday.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to be able to make it Saturday, but Sunday would be another possibility. So I mean, I don't know if there's any interest in that at this time of the year or not, but um, I think after this weekend, then we're going to start getting into the 30s and 40s the following week. So
Yeah, we're actually supposed to be in almost 40 by Friday this week already.
yeah. Well, we'll just let it go then.
I have faith it's going to get cold again. Too early
Quick,
in the season.
Stop.
I cannot stop when I have not yet begun.
Well, what we'll do then is if we see a good opportunity, we'll just send an email out to everybody.
Yeah,
We'll try
okay.
to select a date and we'll just do an email.
That sounds good. All right. And does anyone have anything else?
Well, I just wanted to let everybody know that for March, our program's going to be Jamie Davidson
Oh yeah, thank you.
talking about lens babies again. For us, I think it's the first time she's talked to us about it. I asked her to do lens baby has been bugging me to have somebody on, and then they got Jamie, and we've all had her a couple of times, and she does a nice job. And lens babies, I'm always fascinated by them. I just never go and spend the money to buy them.
I just got my first one because it was on super sale, and then there was an additional $35 off, so I got my Velvet 56 for like $250.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So I'm tempted to get one. I still haven't, but I might. So we got Jamie coming in March. And then in April, we've got Lisa Langell talking about the new nature photography. So that should be sort of interesting. May, I'm still working on somebody. So we'll see what we get for May. And then, of course, June, we have our sunset to sunrise slideshow that we do. So, and I did get the park reserved for the party in July for Old Falls Village Park. Oh, I don't know why I got the 14th down. I don't think it's the 14th. I think it's the 7th or 8th, something like that. But so we got a pretty good rest of the season coming. Like I said, I'm working on May. So I got a couple more people I'm going to check on.
Cool. All right. Now, anything else? If not, have a good night, everyone. And I'll see you all in a month, if not before that, in Port Washington.
I was going to say, for those interested, we got a lunar eclipse coming up on March 3rd. It's an early morning one, so it starts at let's see, 2:44 our time, and full eclipse begins at 5:04 our time. And then full eclipse ends at 6:02, but that's right before sunrise. So
Oh, that's got to be
something
a
to
little
keep in mind.
different. Yeah. Neat
Sounds
idea.
fun.
Also, I came across, if the weather cooperates, there's a snow sculpture championship in Fond du Lac coming up. I believe it's the February 13th through the 15th. So maybe it's similar to what they had in Lake Geneva here recently.
Sounds interesting too. And don't forget the orchid show that's I think that's going on now or starting real soon.
February 10th is the
10th, yeah.
first one.
I knew
I'll
it
be
was
there on the
sometime.
17th.
I'll be
Yeah.
there on the 17th. John better be there on the 17th.
Yes, I will be.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right. Third time's a charm. Anything else?
Hope to see
This is like,
tabletop.
this is way past my bedtime if you can't tell.
At least you don't have to drive home anymore now with these Zoom meetings. So you're saving time
That
and
is true.
money.
That is true. Yes.